Creating art is a strange thing. It just seems so odd to me that we can sit down with the desire and the intention to make a thing, and that very intention, the direction, the outline that we have, can mess with our ability to do the thing. How many times has this happened to you that you've sat down so excited to work on a particular project, on a drawing? Maybe you've even done the sketch work and the prep work ahead of time. But when you finally sit down to work on it, you find yourself crippled by anxiety and stress about this thing that you had been so excited to engage in 5 minutes ago. What is it about art that makes it so wonderful, so lovely, and so rewarding, and yet so anxiety-ridden? It's an odd thing. The more I think about it, I was sitting down today and I was trying to work on something while I was sitting in the gallery. I was trying to work on finishing some of my robot drawings, and I found that my hands were shaking. I was nervous. This is only one of the first couple times that I've sat in the gallery, and I don't feel like I understand everything about it yet. There are certain aspects of that environment that are stressful. What if somebody comes in and asks a question to which I don't know the answer? What if the weather turns bad in a heartbeat? What if the power goes out? What if the Wi-Fi goes out? These are things that likely won't happen, especially on my very limited watch at the facility, but they are things that regardless rest in my mind. And so my hands were shaking and I couldn't draw very straight lines. As you watch the drawing unfolding in the back as I'm talking right now, you'll notice that I'm relaxed. My lines go down fairly easily. Every once in a while I will break them up and I will do smaller segments and then connect them later. That's actually a strategy that I use if my line quality is not good at that moment. I try to work out a lot. Usually I try to work out every single day, and I was frustrated a while back that I realized I can't get straight into my artwork right after I've been running or lifting weights because my hands are shaking. And this is an odd thing. It's something I had just never really thought about. In that secondary case, it's obviously not stress and anxiety, but it's my heart rate is elevated. But anxiety and stress raise your heart rate. And so I have to come to the conclusion that my heart rate is somehow linked to my ability to draw and paint straight lines. And I find that if I push through it, it's exceedingly frustrating. And so I don't. I don't try to push myself in those situations. I take a little bit of a break or I do a different thing. I can type just fine. I can prep things just fine. I can clean things just fine. I can do the laundry just fine. But to try to draw straight lines, to try to draw anything with confidence, it's very, very difficult when I'm anxious or when I'm stressed. But it's an odd thing because sometimes we can create anxiety or stress in the work that we're trying to do simply by having a lot of desire to do it. How strange, and perhaps how unfortunate. I think logically this must link to the emotional investment that we have. We have such a desire to bring these things to life, and we get excited, especially as things start to go well. And that excitement ups our expectations. And when expectations aren't being met, it often creates stress or anxiety. Welcome to the session today. I hope that this doesn't feel too strange of a location to take it, but I don't often talk about things like stress and anxiety on this channel, and especially don't talk about them from my own angle. And that's not because I think that it's taboo, that we shouldn't talk about it. In fact, quite the opposite. I think that talking about things like this can actually start to dismantle some of the weird social and societal taboos that we have about them. Most of us as artists experience some form of anxiety and stress. I want to start off by saying that mine is of a very low caliber. I don't have to take any kind of medication, and I've only seen a counselor several times for it. Now, for some of you, that's already a lot more than you might have dealt with it. But for most people in my life who would say that they have anxiety, I am like 3% on that spectrum. Now, I bring this up again because I want to just give you the authentic concept and idea of where I am with it. And the biggest reason that I mention it today is simply so that it doesn't remain in the shadows. Because I would wager that many of you listening suffer some manner of anxiety or stress about your artwork, especially when you are particularly excited about what it is that you're going to put on the page today. This is not really the direction that I had planned on for this. I kind of wanted to start talking about intentionality and how our intentions mess with our desire to do things. Well, not really our desire, but they mess with the execution of a thing. But as I'm talking now, and as I'm kind of unpacking this and unraveling it, I think that it is stress and anxiety related. And I use the two interchangeably, not really interchangeably, actually. I use them in tandem because from my limited perspective, they are usually linked. And I want to use both terms as I do not have any manner of diagnosis in this capacity, and I don't want to be presumptuous. So that's why I'm talking the way I do. That's a lot of caveats, but as I'm starting to talk about things that for some people are diagnosable medical conditions, it seems ever so slightly logical. But I've noticed that there are certain things that I can do when I'm stressed, and there are certain things that I can't. And I have found oddly that certain kinds of art are also rewarding for me when I am struggling with anxiety or stress. This kind of drawing is not it. This kind of drawing is probably the most precise kind that I do, and therefore I am only able to do it when I am in a really good, healthy mental headspace. The kind that I can work on regardless seems to be working with Bic pens, with ballpoint pens. They just don't carry much stress for me at all. Even a pencil carries some level of stress because things smudge and I hate being dirty. But a ballpoint pen is very, very forgiving. So today, when I was sitting at the gallery and I found that I was too anxious in that moment to make my good straight lines, I switched to a Bic and I started crafting out slow, iterative shapes and just messing with them. I had no intention, and after about 5 to 10 minutes, I felt much better. And this is, again, such a peculiar thing, right? One form of art was making me stressed, or I wasn't able to do it because I was stressed, and then another was stress alleviating. This is an interesting thing, and I would really be curious to hear from all of you. Do you find that you have similar things? Do you have certain media that are anxiety-inducing and certain media that are anxiety-relieving? It might be good for other people to hear about it, but it also might just be good to share. For me, I find that something like this kind of Micron ink drawing is quite stressful because everything that goes down is permanent. Perhaps if I spent more time working in digital media, that would be a little bit less stressful. That would be something that is stress relieving for me. But as of right now, digital media is actually a little bit more stressful because it feels so tangential to traditional drawing. I've spent a lot of time working with pencils and pens and brushes, and I have just not spent that much time drawing in Photoshop or Krita or Procreate. They're great programs, and every once in a while I will have a lovely time on them, but it always feels like I'm trying to translate things through the lens of a traditional artist. There's nothing wrong with this, of course, but it makes that transition difficult, and it makes it kind of joyless. In the next couple months, I think I will be investing a lot more time, and the thing that I'm really excited about is taking drawings like this and actually moving them into a digital framework. Because if I take a drawing like this, I could digitally color it in Photoshop pretty easily, and I'm actually getting the best of both worlds. I found a couple artists on Instagram who do this, and I'm excited to try it out. So again, we get kind of the excitement. But I would wager too that once I get into that, because I'm excited about it, I will be a little bit more anxious, and so maybe my lines won't be straight. But what's the solution here? Because you can't just avoid everything that gets you excited when it comes to art, right? Because that seems so antithetical to so many things. I don't know. I don't have a perfect solution for this. Not that I have perfect solutions for many things, but I would wager that it probably comes down to investing your time into something like that slowly. I'm not going to dive into digital art and have an expectation of myself that I am working 20 hours in it a week. I will dive back in, and I will give myself very limited time, and I will reward myself with traditional drawing on the side. So I think that might be a good way for me to engage with it, and maybe that would be a good way for you to engage with something that's stressful as well. I find that oil painting is stressful for me, particularly because it's also a really rewarding art form when things turn out well. In fact, all the pieces that I currently have in the gallery are oil paintings, and I was lucky and fortunate and excited that those pieces got juried in. They were voted in by other artists, which is lovely and exhilarating, but it hasn't done anything to ease my stress and anxiety about oil painting, because there's some natural expectation now that I'm going to have to produce more pieces, and I'm going to have to produce pieces that are on par with the pieces I've made in the past. Now, all of reality says that that is doable, right? It's totally logical. That doesn't necessarily mean that the stress doesn't exist. And that's an odd thing too, is sometimes you can be stressed or anxious about your artwork in some way, and the people around you might say, well, I don't understand. Like, your anxiety is stupid because look at all these wonderful pieces you've produced in the past. And they might actually be right, but it's a really insensitive way to talk to somebody who's struggling with that in the moment. And maybe artists are different than other people, but I think most of us we all kind of sit in this weird stage of, I've been successful up until this point, but what if I wake up one day and it's not there anymore? I thought this was kind of a weird thing and kind of an insular thing just to artists. But in listening to a lot of writers recently, I've realized that a lot of them are kind of the same way. That some writers, even really renowned writers like Stephen King, sometimes have this fear of, I'm just going to keep writing because someday I'm afraid I'm going to wake up and the muse has left me and I will no longer be able to do this. I don't know if Stephen King specifically said that, but it's people on his caliber that have talked about this. And I experience this too, and I would wager a lot of you do as well. So if you are experiencing some manner of anxiety or stress when it comes to your art, especially because you have a lot of expectations, try to breathe deeply. Try to take a step away and do things that are a little bit lower stress, or reward yourself with them when you put time into something that is a little bit more difficult or a little bit harder on you. But you'll probably find, like I do, that the stressful things artistically get better the more you do them. But you also might find, like I have, that pushing yourself too much at a particular time is not great. So I try to engage in things slowly. I try to reward myself with fun, stress-relieving things when I can, and I try to always be drawing and painting things that I find enjoyable. It's why I've moved away from painting lots of landscapes and mostly paint birds, because they're enjoyable to me. And the strategies and the techniques that I'm learning when I paint the birds also transfer to other things, even annoying landscapes. Well, as always, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you got something beneficial out of this session. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.